The process of applied functional science is the transformation of the notion into the motion.
You're listening to the Gray Institute podcast, a production of Gray Institute.
Move your body, come on, move your body.
Okie dokie, what a joy it is for me. Oh, at any time I get to spend time with my hero, Michael Kane, and we're going to have just some fun, just talking, and if nothing else, get caught up. And if somebody kind of on the outside is listening, going, "Boy, that's kind of boring. Those two old guys talking." That's okay, but I think we have some guidance and direction that if you are listening, it'll be of value to you to kind of hear the wisdom of Michael Kane and kind of go from there. So, good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Welcome.
I really appreciate this.
Let everybody know where you at right now.
I am in Yakima, Washington, which is kind of central Washington, southern central Washington. Yeah.
How long have you been there?
Since 1994.
Whoa, it's a long time ago.
Yeah. So what's crazy is, I've been in physical therapy, I think 40 or 41 years. And I've been in Yakima, which I never imagined I'd live here. I didn't even know where it was, but I've been in private practice for 30 years now. So that's
and who
crazy.
You hang out with at your house? Who's there?
My wife and my son, Owen, who's going to turn 18 this weekend.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my son was born during the first gift class. So
that's how we know how old he is.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's even in the spooky veins. Good golly, Miss Molly, and amazing Owen. Yeah.
Yep.
Always knew he's going to be a special young man, and he definitely is that. So, well, you kind of told us a little bit of how long you've been a therapist. Just kind of give us a journey of your just your lifetime through therapy, and a little bit about your private practice, and just a little more so people go, I kind of know that guy now.
Just quickly, went to college at UC Davis, played football there, was kind of a pre-med student, actually exercise physiology department they had there. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I pretty much figured out by my senior year I didn't want to be a doctor. Everyone else was going to, if they didn't get into medical school, they were going into getting a master's degree in exercise physiology. So that was the path I was on. I played football in college. My senior year, I thought, hey, the trainer who I had a good relationship with was also a physical therapist. And I thought this would be awesome to kind of work with athletes. I think a lot of people that play sports think that. And so I decided to apply to physical therapy school. Really didn't have any experience. I worked part of a year in the training room after I got finished playing. And I luckily got accepted into this Baylor University U.S. Army program. So I went into the no real experience in the military. I mean, my dad had served, but we weren't really around military people. So next thing you know, you're an officer in the Army. You got to go through basic, and then you go through this program. And that was really the blessing of my life to get into that program. I was surrounded by great physical therapists. I mean, just awesome, smart physical therapists. And, you're a second lieutenant. There's full bird colonels there. There's people 30 years older than you. But so you had these go-to people. You'd watch them. You could jump on the phone and go, I'm seeing this guy. I have no idea what to do with him. I had these mentors like Bill O'Grady and Joe DeTore that were just great physical therapists. And so that kind of got me started. So been going at it ever since. I got out of the military. I worked for a guy, and late 80s, early 90s, I took your first class with my college roommate, who's also maybe the greatest physical therapist in the world up there, Michael Hansen. And we started working together, and he took me to this, we got to go see this guy, Gary Gray. And we saw you in Bellevue, Washington, I think in like 91, something like that. And so I would just say at the time, I thought, I'm pretty smart therapist. I go to a lot of courses. I studied. I was just involved in this manual therapy 2-year program, a master's program in orthopedic manual therapy, and sitting in this class listening to Gary Gray, and I get this horrible feeling in my gut, like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. and there was a great football coach at Pacific Lutheran University who used to say this quote, when someone would mess up on the football field, he'd kind of get after him a little bit, but then he'd say, you didn't know. So it's okay. I'm going to forgive it. And that's how I was thinking, like, this is weird. Like, I don't know what this guy is talking about. And I didn't know. And I didn't know what he was talking about. So, and I really think that from that time on, I was motivated to learn. I got to figure out more about how this human body works. And also I've always had kind of an interest in figuring out what's really behind all this. And so since you introduced me to a lot of this stuff from AFS, you didn't even call it AFS then, but I wanted to figure out what's the science that backs this up.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spent really since Gift, 18 years now delving into the literature to kind of see what supports what we're doing here. So that's been an amazing journey.
Yep. And that's actually, I think, one of your passions, but it's one of your gifts. You have an ability to, I think, look at the deep science and create simplicity from that complexity. And I think that's probably why you like it a lot, because that's something that, you kind of have the knack to do and you have the desire to do. And then when did you start your own private practice?
Well, I was running a really fantastic. It was one of probably the best jobs I ever had, was a sports medicine clinic, and we were connected right next door with these orthopedic surgeons. And there was a family practice doctor there who was the director of that clinic, named Stu Freed, who became a great friend of Mike and Mike Hansen and I, still a good friend. And so, but then I got married, and my wife at the time got into this dental hygiene program in Yakima, Washington. So we were just newly married. So I had to move, and suddenly I'm in this small town. I'm working for this guy, and he's trying to get out of his practice. I realized fairly quickly that nobody was practicing the way I was practicing. And it ended up that he was going to close his practice. We couldn't come up with an agreement on how to make a sale, because he had a big building, and I thought, and I'm new here, no way I'm going to try and take on 3,500 square feet. I thought 1,500, 1,800 square feet is something I needed. So he ended up firing me. First job I ever got fired from. And 3 months later, I opened up my own practice. And with the help of the attorney that I was talking to you about, and with the passion to do something different. And within 2 years, moved into a bigger facility, and off we go. So
the blessing of getting fired, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so it motivates you got to turn it around fast. So
the people listening, I'm sure would really enjoy hearing a little bit about your practice right now, the name of your practice, kind of what's going on there. If you were just going to describe it maybe to your next door neighbor, how would you describe your practice now?
Well, it's called Pro Motion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think after seeing you and thinking about things, I want to make this practice about movement, and make it about, I wanted to make it a couple things. One is to do physical therapy the way that you were teaching us, that most people weren't doing, a kind of a functional approach, but I also had this manual therapy degree. So I kind of wanted to meld movement science with manual therapy, because I always felt the hands-on stuff is important, but without the connection of the movement science and the kind of the AFS approach, I think you end up treating segments and not the whole body. And then, I guess you really started this. You had this natural way with people. I never really thought about how important communication was. And so I spent a lot of time going down that rabbit hole, the behavioral sciences. How can you improve your ability to interview someone, develop a relationship with someone, have that person think, oh, this person really cares about me. Not just because I would always get this at the end, nobody ever looked at me this way before, but not so much nobody ever talked to me this way before. Nobody ever got me, so to speak. And so spending a lot of time learning communication skills, I'd suggest people read and study. It's this behavioral approach that's evidence-based called motivational interviewing. So things like that. So I really wanted to create a spot where people could feel like they were heard and listened to and appreciated, and that they would get an approach where when they'd leave, they'd go, nobody's ever looked at me that way. I never understood things that way. I can take this information now that I feel better and I can apply it to my life. So
Yeah.
that's kind of been the approach.
Yeah. I can remember fairly vividly the first time you did take chain reaction with Hansen. And one of the things I had the ability to do back then is look around the room and see who was happy and who was not. Who was kind of looking at me like, "Are you crazy?" Or okay, I'll let the guy keep talking. A little bit of this makes some sense. And I know I remember talking to you, and I think you were just coming off your 2-year program of your manual certification program, and I might have implied that that's not necessarily all there is to manual therapy.
Right.
I remember we had a little chit chat about that, but I think it's kind of fun to hear you talk about and very quickly summarize it. It's kind of like a segmental approach versus the whole approach.
Right.
Strangely enough, both of them are good, and I think the best is both of them together. So talk a little bit about your journey through manual therapy. And I think the other thing what I'd like to hear you say or give your opinion on is we're a doctor of physical therapy. How much, if you kind of followed me through the day, how much manual therapy would I be doing? I know that's kind of a tough one, but I can tell you my opinion years ago is I thought I was so good at developing exercises I didn't have to touch anybody.
Right.
Except I quickly figured out the body has this ordinary path of least resistance, and I've failed every time by doing that. So I'd really love to hear your opinion.
All right, let's see so first of all, I'll say another thing that I found interesting, because when I took that course, I was going through this manual therapy program. And first of all, I was watching this just recently, this thing on Julian Edelman. He played for the Patriots. And so I think it's funny because Julian Edelman was so motivated to be a player on that team and to be able to perform at a level that would, add to the team's success. And, he was like, he had an all-pro receiver in front of him at the time. And it just said he just hung around Brady as much as he could. If Brady was somewhere, he was standing in the background. Brady had moved to Los Angeles in the summertime, and Edelman would show up there. He'd get an apartment and just, if he could figure out where Brady was and go and hang out and try to receive, play catch with him and start picking his brain. And I feel like that's what we did with you. We went to that one course, and then I just kept going to courses. I probably took your foot course 4 or 5 times. So you say you're looking around trying to figure out who's getting this and who isn't. But I think we just got it, and we just said, we got to go to as many courses as we can, pick this guy's brain. But anyway, at the time, manual therapy was big in the military, and the couple guys that I ended up being able to work with were great manual therapists. This guy, Bill O'Grady, still teaches. So, manipulation, getting that pop, and, someone stands up and all of a sudden their range of motion is better. You thought, man, I got to learn that stuff. But then as I'm taking the class, for instance, when I took this Ola Grimsby class, they talked a lot about joint and muscle receptors. There's the first time I really heard about, the proprioceptors in the joints and ligaments. But the way that they taught it was the therapist is taking hold of a body part, say a cervical facet joint or a lumbar facet joint, and based on the technique, they were stimulating the receptors. But they only talked about it in the sense of, you're using the receptors to inhibit tone or to inhibit pain. Not really about what those receptors did. We learned about where they were, and they talked a little bit about what they did, but you're only using them passively by you moving the joint and not thinking about them in terms of, why are those receptors there in the first place? And you talked extensively about it, that, hey, it's the receptors. That's the number one thing we're probably doing when we get people move. It's the receptors that turn on the muscles. And so it was those kind of things that took it from, again, I'm thinking, wow, I'm learning all this stuff that I didn't know about receptors in manual therapy. And then I go see this guy who's not even talking about manual therapy yet. And he's teaching me about the receptors in a whole different way, because that's way more important, I think, teaching the client or the patient how to take advantage of their receptors rather than me trying to move their joints to influence their receptors. So I heard this term once called consilience, and that's kind of bringing information from different disciplines together that makes sense. And so that was an example. Like, I learned it on one side, but then I hear you and I'm like, we got to put these together somehow so that I may have an ability to influence these receptors while I have a patient laying on the table. But the real key thing is to facilitate the use of these receptors so they can walk around, throw a ball, kick a ball, run, play a sport, lift a box. So that was the amazing thing. So I use manual therapy almost every day on almost every patient. And I think one of the big things is we were talking about, developing a relationship with a patient. And I think this guy, Ola Grimsby, I don't know if this was his quote, but he said one time that manual therapy is the quiet communication between the therapist body and the patient. And I think that's an amazing way to think about it. You can really tell a lot about a patient by touching them, and they can certainly get a lot of information about where you're coming from, I think, based on your touch. So
Yeah, that's big time. I think the perception from a lot of people that obviously a lot of people don't know us, and some people do know us, and some of the people know us kind of think that this AFS, this applied functional science, hopefully the science behind what we do, is kind of another technique. I'll hear people say, "Well, I don't use the AFS techniques," which is confusing because all it is gravity and ground reaction force and mass momentum and change. And so I'm thinking, well, if you don't use proprioceptors, if you don't use the muscles the way they're designed to use, if you don't use three planes of motion, what are you using? So, and I like the way you just described it. What word did you use when things come from different angles and come?
Consilience.
Consilience. Ooh, that's a new one. I'm gonna have to write that one down and look that one up.
And I think that's what you've done. That's what you did. Whether you were, I don't know. That the thing about you, we don't really know, or people don't really know, is how well read you are. But I think you just have this. You're curious. That's one thing, and so you do read a lot of things, and you see connections. And I think that's what was interesting and frustrating at times to go, what is this? How does he see this stuff? That's what sets me off on this journey to find these answers. And and if you looked in the science, I think what you did early on, there's a science now called ecological sciences. And ecological sciences is the science of observing people doing the things they do in the environments they do them in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you've always talked about. Well, watch them throw the ball. Show me you're having pain lifting. Show me how you do that. It's the show me. And that's solid science based now. That's the kind of things that I've discovered because I'd be stimulated and going, where is he coming up with this stuff? And so I start looking around, poking around, or might just be reading an article and see something like ecological sciences. What is that? And then leads me to this guy, J.J. Gibson, who was training fighter pilots and talking about this kind of stuff, so I've just spent a lot of time. I could just say everything that you've said that made me go, man, what is he getting this? I've gone down a rabbit hole to figure out, is there anything to back this up? And by God, there is. I mean, so that's when you say AFS, AFS isn't a technique. AFS is the consilience of all the sciences that come together that are showing how a human body functions, feels, and thinks. And so.
Again, this is for me is just getting fun to get caught up. I did a little webinar the other day and made the comment that I'd seen somebody that I hadn't seen for a number of years. And the thing that happens to a lot of us is, oh, man, it just feels like I just saw you yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody experiences that. But what is that? And a lot of times I think that's the strength and the power and the mystery of the spirit that literally, we physically haven't been together for, the last month or two, so to speak. But all of a sudden I get this privilege of just seeing you on a thing called Zoom, and I feel hugely connected. And a lot of that is your giftedness of being able to listen. But I think one of the things you do extremely well is you take stuff and then you make it better. That's, to me, I think that's the key. You do have that consilience ability to bring everything in, and then you actually go off on this thing to make it actually better by putting it all together. And that takes a lot of courage, because in doing that, you got to sometimes leave other things behind.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of the fears that a lot of us have. We go to school and we learn all this and stuff and go, well, but if I do that, I might have to leave that behind. And well, yeah, if it's not the ideal thing to do with that patient, it's probably a good idea to leave that behind. How old are you now? Would you mind sharing with everybody?
65.
So what you seem more motivated now than back when you were 45? Is that a true statement?
I'd say as motivated. I think I have a better direction now, but one of the frustrations when you do what we're talking about is that I'm afraid, one day someone's going to go into my computer once I'm gone, and they're going to go, look at this stuff this guy was writing about and thinking about. It's like basement tapes. They're going to find all these songs and like nobody ever heard them. So that's one thing that's why I appreciate what you've done, because I think that, we were talking a little bit about the programs now. Now you're a doctor of physical therapy, and it's amazing the amount, it's 3 years now. Although I'd say it's really the biggest change is they spend a year or more in clinics. Their clinicals ours used to be 4 weeks. They're 3 months now, Right. But the approach still is not utilizing this incredible information that you started with AFS that I've continued to study. It's like, wow, you guys, there's so much information that would simplify your task when you go into that clinic, that would help you learn how to communicate better. And they say the number one thing for people to follow through on a treatment regimen, let's say, is that when they leave, they go, that guy got me. He understood me. He heard me. And that's a skill set you have to learn. Some people have a natural ability, but again, I think one of my favorite quotes I've ever read is this: if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be successful, because there are people that have natural gifts and abilities. But if you can't scale it or scope it, then, you're the only one who can be successful. And for our field to be able to save this country, let's say musculoskeletal disorders are the number one cost in healthcare, and they're the number one cause of disability. People think it's cancer and heart disease. We spend twice as much on musculoskeletal disorders. And I think there's never been a time versus right now where there might be a little bit of room for us to become the primary care musculoskeletal discipline, because we have this ability to apply this psychosocial, ecological, I'll throw that out, AFS approach to evaluating, coming up with solutions, solution pathways for the client that helps them. Then they have tools that they can use when they go home. So, and you've always talked about, you got to make it home workable. And I think that's a key thing. They got it. And so then the next time they get a ache or pain, they have something to go to before they go to the doctor. Because, it's worse than ever, I think, now that most physicians, if you go to your family practice doctor, they get like, we've looked at this, maybe 1 to 2 weeks of musculoskeletal. So their approach is going to be a medication and rest. Right. Don't do that thing. And as you know, the more you don't do it, you're going to lose it. Then they go from there to maybe a pain clinic where they're going to get an injection or more medication, or then an orthopedic surgeon where they're going to throw up the film and go, Jesus, Gary, look at your back. You've got the back of an 80-year-old man.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to need, I don't think we need surgery now, but, in a couple of years, you'll be back. And 2 years later, you're at their door ready for that surgery because that's what they told you. And they showed you that picture.
Right. Yeah.
So we could undo all that. We could have a huge effect on making the country healthier and saving billions of dollars in healthcare money. But I don't think there's the motivation with big government and big medical models and big universities and big pharma to make that change.
Yeah. If you were king and you had the ability to pull strings and make things happen, because and I know it's happening to you. It's definitely happened to me as I'm getting older. And it's kind of interesting. I know you have a giftedness on music, which I totally am jealous of. I got to see you singing with your brother and playing your guitar, and man, that's been my dream forever. It'll never happen. But
Yeah.
the fear of, hey, I got all these great songs in here, and my fear is I'm dead, and people go, wow, what a great song. How come I didn't get to hear him sing that? That's but I think part of our fear is to know that this is a problem. It's not on a downward trend. The musculoskeletal disease is on an upward trend. Theoretically, we, by definition, are the practice that should be able to handle that and hopefully even prevent it, but we haven't. We've stayed status quo. So now you're king of everything, and you get to. What would you do? And don't let a barrier of, well, I'm not sure that could even happen. What would you ultimately do to change it? Because that's kind of what I'd like to do over the next year or two if I get to live that long. So I'd like to have your insight. What do we got to do?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the kind of stuff I don't know enough about, the political stuff. When I see, say, what potentially, let's say, from the medical realm, and this is more in terms of medications and things, what might Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's a guy that's going to potentially be a change agent. We're going to look at things different, because it's weird that in this country, we're the most unhealthy country of the major countries in the world.
Right.
We're super unhealthy. We're overweight. We have all kinds of diseases. We die sooner than other countries. A lot of it has to do with the food we eat and what they put in it. But a lot of it has to do with movement too. And so I don't know if we could get the ear of someone. Like, I think it's amazing. I took all this information, AFS stuff that I've learned, the Consilience stuff that I've been reading, and put it into AI. I've been working with ChatGPT for the last maybe 6 or 7 months. So now what's the weird thing is it knows AFS now. It knows what it's about. It knows the other sciences that I've looked at. And I asked this thing, so to speak, what is there globally a better approach than this? Because presumably that AI has access to every article, every book, every website it can get on. And, I work with some other friends. We were all in that first gift class. Some of the brightest minds I've ever met, and some of them I still have a relationship, were from our class with you. So we stay connected and we talk about private practice. And anyway, if I put it in there, it says there's not another approach globally that can compare to this biopsychosocial ecological approach. It's a process approach. It's not techniques, it's principles and strategies on how to treat people with musculoskeletal disorders. That's powerful, but I don't know exactly where to take that. We have a PT school here now. It's just 2 years old. I sent this excerpt from this search that I did through ChatGPT to her, and I said, because they're a new program, they're just getting accredited, they're expensive. kids don't want to necessarily go to Yakima, Washington to a brand new program that's this expensive. It's a beautiful facility. The director is great. I really like her. I'm saying to her, hey, look at this. Like, I could show you an approach. Maybe what you could do is turn your program into, hey, if you want to treat musculoskeletal disorders, this is the school.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than most schools have to do everything. You got to do everything. And what if you're going to have to meet certain criteria, obviously, for accreditation, but what if you turn this program into, hey, when you can come out of this program, you are going to be a musculoskeletal specialist. I don't know. I know you guys tried to do that before too. So
yeah, no, we've gone to the powers to be, and it's interesting. We'll talk to some professors of physical therapy, and most of them agree. Most of them go, "Yeah, we're missing the mark. We're not teaching these kids to be the neuromusculoskeletal experts of the world. We're not teaching them how to diagnose. We're not teaching them how to figure the cause of the symptoms. We're not teaching them how to think. We're not teaching them based on a process. We're now getting into these evidence-based protocols, which I personally believe is the wrong direction. We'll talk about that on a different time.
Yeah.
But then so I say, well, let us give you some information for free. We've had thousands and thousands of educational videos. So let us at least give them to you for free so the kids can see them. And their answer is no. It's going to confuse our kids. And here's the bottom line. It's not on the state board. And as soon as we hear that, we go, I can't argue it.
Yeah.
If you teach them a approach that is logical and that has a process that doesn't have an ABC to it, it's not going to fit our test. And therefore, since our test hasn't changed much in the last since you and I took it, and definitely since I took it 50 years ago, I always tell people we were the smartest profession in the world 50 years ago. And we already knew what the test should be, what it should motivate as far as what we should learn, because the test is the thing that motivates what's being taught. So you stay accredited, so to speak. Or there's another reason that we haven't changed much, so I have my opinion on that. So let me tell you a quick story. I'd like you to react to this. Not too long ago, I had a person that's from a very, very high-end influential healthcare group here in the United States. And he was kind enough to come in. And basically, he's a chief innovation officer. So doesn't, as he claimed, know nothing about medicine or therapy or anything like that. But he says, I work with some of the brightest minds in the world, and our job is to innovate. Our job is to create products that take advantage of AI, that take advantage of all the new technology in order to make better healthcare. And he said, so therefore I need to talk to you. And they brought their whole entourage of people in here, biomechanical experts, biomedical experts, just business experts. And after we got done talking for a while, he says, I really would like to take all of the AFS IP that you guys have come up with, and I'd like to try to develop a system whereby which everybody can benefit from this. And I said, well, tell me why. And I thought this was the most brilliant statement I've heard in a long time. He goes, we believe we should become the Mayo of movement. And I said, whoa, time out. What did you just say? And he goes, well, as you know, we're part of blank hospital system. We're known throughout the world. And we, just like everybody else, treat cardiovascular disease. We treat cancer. We treat orthopedic, and we put new joints in people. We did it. Says, but he says, but you know what the bottom line is for all these people? What they want? Movement. And he made this comment. I believe movement specialists are more important than the cardiovascular surgeon. Now, I'm a physical therapist. I'm going to say, amen, hallelujah. I'm not sure if I agree with that. But his point was, it's all about movement. You can, and until we really understand movement and how to understand movement to try to be a preventative group, which I think is going to be the key if we're going to take over anything. Dennis, 25, 30 years ago, were brilliant. They finally scratched their head and said, hey, why don't we con people and come in here before we have to fill a cavity? And the other dentist said, you're crazy. They hate us. but all of a sudden now, our teeth are better than they ever been in the last 30 years. And it's because 80% of what dentists get in revenue is from prevention. And I believe in the musculoskeletal world, if we just stay reactive and just stay saying, well, I'll wait till you hurt your ACL and then we'll work on you, or I'll wait till you have fibromyalgia. I think if we just sit back doing that, we're not going to get to where we want to go. I think we somehow have to take over the concept of what I would call preventative medicine. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's interesting. I remember a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, reading this book, and the Cleveland Clinic, not the Mayo Clinic, has a division now called functional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about natural products and that kind of thing.
Right.
Function. The doctor's name, I think, was Mark Hyman. Excellent book. So I was thinking, of course, when I read that, I'm like, well, that's what we do, except on the other end.
Right.
This is about what you can put inside your body to help things function better. But we have this whole functional approach, right, that you pioneered on how movement would affect and benefit people. And here's an interesting thing. So here's a concept of Consilience. I don't know how I came across this book or saw this guy on YouTube, but the University of California, Berkeley has a linguist department. It's the best in the world, probably. This guy, and what's weird too, is right around when you were starting, a lot of different people in different areas were working on similar things. But they're different disciplines, right? So they don't intersect. He wrote this book called The Metaphors We Live By. And in that book, their research on language is that 98% of our language is metaphorical in nature. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means when you're trying to describe something, especially something abstract like love or the stock market, we use metaphors, and metaphors are based on experiences, physical experiences that you've either had, watched, read about. So when you say, hey, Michael, how's your relationship going with that girl you're dating? And I go, I feel like we're heading down a dead end road, or we've hit the rocks, right? We're spinning our wheels. I say spinning our wheels, and you immediately can conjure in your head that exact feeling. You're sitting in a car, you're on ice, the wheels are spinning, you're gripping that thing, you're frustrated, all of those things out of that movement experience. So that was another one of those things that I went, wow, that's so weird. Like movement is the key. It's how we develop language. It's how we develop, obviously, our ability to achieve things. Without movement, who was the book, The Purpose-Driven Life? He said, without movement in life, life has no meaning. Right. Without movement. And I looked at that and I said, yeah, or that isn't the exact quote, but he said something about purpose in life. And I thought to myself, without movement, purpose has no pathway, right? I mean, you have to be able to move. And thinking is movement. Talking is movement. You're using muscles, you're using your neurological system just to think. So without a body, that's the other thing this guy said. If we didn't have a brain, if we didn't have a body, we couldn't be in existence. There'd be nothing for our brain to think about. So when I think of that mind, body, spirit now, I think it's probably body, mind, spirit, or it might be spirit, body, mind, but it's body before mind. So I think that thought process in terms of function would mean, man, everyone would be probably a lot happier, more joy in the world, because you can enjoy your body as it moves, and you can get to doing things if you can move. Yeah. And if you can move efficiently. So,
yeah. I just hope everybody's enjoying this half as much as I am. I always learn from you and always get motivated by you. And I always write down a number of books I have to go get now, which is always good. I love reading books that you recommend. I think you recommended motivational interviewing years ago, and that's been a staple for me.
Yeah.
I think that's something I need to read every 6 weeks, because I think it's that important. But there's a lot of people listening to this, hopefully, and hopefully they've hung in there with us by now. And I think they have, just because of basically how intelligent and charming you are. But you always do these podcasts, and people, it's coming. So what would you recommend, for somebody listening to this, kind of
Mm-hmm.
in their professional career? We're kind of old farts, and maybe they're not as old as us, and say, hey, listen, I wish somebody would have came to me when I was in my 20s with a 2x4, hit me across the head and tell me what would you tell them
About this profession?
about anything, about life, profession, what they should be thinking about?
Well, I think hopefully, obviously, this profession, there's something about it that, at our age, we're still curious.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being curious is a good thing because it keeps you stimulated, it keeps you searching for answers. So I think that's one thing. If you be curious, and then there's so much information, especially now at your fingertips. I mean, we used to have to, I'm thinking about in college, we had to go into the library, use the card file, find the article you want, go find it on a shelf somewhere, open up the book that had all the articles and get to the one you want, and it's gone. It's torn out. or then you found the articles, then you had to spend an hour copying them, using the copy machine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it was. And today, all the information's right at your fingertips. And I think that if people that wanted to help people get better and that are interested in musculoskeletal disorders, I think if they just searched a little bit, they could find the information that would keep them fired up for the next 40 years. But again, the challenge is we have to realize these doctors that you work with are not really going to care what you're doing. They don't care to know what you're doing, and they don't know what you're doing. So you've got to not only learn to give this kind of care, but you got to figure out a way to let people know about it,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get it to grow.
Yeah.
And I think that's been probably my biggest frustration is, I'm in a small town, and you would think, some people say, hey, make the big time where you are. But sometimes when you're a small town, if there's not enough people that are kind of keyed into going, hey, how do we do things better here? You don't think you may not grow as fast or as big as you want to. But so I think that's why we got to figure out a way to communicate this stuff. And I think you have to. Your son was this, your son, we took a course that your son led on story brand. That's an amazing approach, to way to think about it. But you got to call people to action.
Mm-hmm.
That's a key thing. You got to, and that might be your patients. Like, hey, go out and tell people about us. Get online and write. Would you write us about us so that people know about us? I think that's one of the hardest things for people to do, because in our field we're caregivers, and a lot of people don't want to draw attention to themselves. They don't want to ask that question, but
Right.
You got to really call people to action, not only to get them to get themselves motivated to make the change, but also to get the word out, so to speak. You got to ask for it. But I read this book once that was called To Sell Is Human, because I was never very good at selling. And then I read this book, and I'm like, wow, like we're selling when we're 3 years old,
Yep.
and trying to get stuff. I want that cookie. How am I going to figure out how I'm going to manipulate mom and dad to have them give me that cookie? I might lay on the ground, scream and kick, and pretty soon I got the cookie, I'm selling. So I just met, Molly and I were just at this, we just had dinner on New Year's Eve and ran into some friends. All the guys were salespeople. And this one guy in particular was like, I think your son should work for your father-in-law. My father-in-law sells cars. This summer and for the next few summers while in college, at selling cars. He's got to learn how to sell. To them, that's the basis for their success, is selling.
Yep.
So, and that's a skill set, because that's what we're doing, right? We're selling an approach. We're selling them, hey, you need to, if you did this, you could get where you want to. And some friends of mine read this book by this FBI negotiator, and it was called Never Split the Difference. But he called it negotiating, but it was really selling. And he said, the art of negotiation is to get the other person to have your way. And that's, I think, what we need to learn to do better, if we really believe what we're doing is helpful.
Yeah, I think again, I can't agree with you more. And I think sometimes sales has a negative connotation. You know, if I said, "Hey, I'm going to call you coach," you'd go, "Oh, that's a compliment," or "I'm going to call you teacher." Well, that's a compliment. But if I call you a salesperson, it may not connotate that same complimentary qualities, but it really is. I mean, it's a tridox. All great coaches are salesmen. You know,
Yeah.
they get out there and they sell to their players what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. And great teachers are salesmen, like you say. And I think what frustrates me is I believe our approach is a lot like being the gentleman you talked about, the car salesman that has a $4,000 van on the parking lot. And salesman number one, his goal may be, well, somehow today I want to sell that for $6,000. I know the value is only 4,000, but man, I'll be pretty happy, and my boss will be happy if I make an extra $2,000 on this. The other salesman is like, it's a $4,000 van. If we get $4,000 out of it, that's great. The third type of salesman is what I hope to be someday. Is I have this thing of great value, at least $4,000, and I see a family that needs a van. They just got to get their daughter to the hospital and for treatment, and they don't have transportation. And I figure a way to get it to them for $2,000. Well, I don't know about you, but when I go home, being that third salesman, I'm pretty happy. The first one might be happy temporarily because they made $2,000 extra, but the third one is going to be, man, I used what I had to really impact somebody's life, and by doing it, I didn't die. I'm going to still eat, and so I think that's one of the challenges we have to understand that we have a huge product, an amazing product in this thing called movement. And how do we then sell it? How do we really let people know about it and the value?
Yeah, the weird thing about our business is that doesn't happen in terms of here's a vehicle worth this amount of money, and do you upsell it? Do you sell it for what it's worth, or do you give it away?
Right.
We all get paid the same. I got this beautiful clinic. It got all kinds of cool equipment. It looks good inside. You could just be like you've always talked about. You could just have one room, four walls, nothing in it. You get paid the same as I do.
Right.
Right. So, and then the flip side is, I think when you talk about those three salesmen, if I'm the owner, the guy that keeps selling it for 2,000 isn't going to be there long, right?
There long, is he? No.
But, to get yourself into a position where you could go,
yeah,
like you do, we've got this great facility and we're making good money and everyone here is making good money. We can give some care away, because they need it.
So. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. So how are we going to get Michael Kane to pull the songs out, so to speak, and that's literal, out of the computer and share it with the world? And how are we going to get Michael Kane to share his wisdom with the world? You haven't listened if you haven't picked up the amazing wisdom that you have over the last almost 50 minutes. I think we've been a little close to an hour. And so how do we get more Mike Kane out there into the world? Because I think that would help. How do we do that?
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe, we kick around the ideas of writing a book. You've written a book, multiple books. I don't know if it's books. I don't know if it's podcasts. I don't even know, I don't know how interested people in our profession are in this now,
Right.
because it's weird because they spend so much more money than we did. And their dedication has to go longer to be in school. And so I don't know why it appears that some of them are kind of like, once they're out, I get it. You put in your 3 years, you kind of want to coast for a little bit. And you know what? I think maybe part of it is that we don't go to courses anymore. And there's something about going to a course,
Yep.
seeing that person up there, meeting the people around you. And all of a sudden you got a tribe of people that think that think like you do, that are motivated like you. Or if you're not even that motivated, I mean, think of the number of classes I can think of things of people like, the F knitter, someone in the class, you're teaching this class and everyone's on fire. And one person's in the background knitting, like they are not getting it. But after 2 or 3 days, all of a sudden something happens, something changes.
Right.
So I think there's something to be said for the way that we used to do it. You get on an airplane, you go somewhere, you're out of your own comfort zone. You're forced to interact with other people. And if you have someone like you were that was on fire when they're up there, you know, it catches you catch it. And that's what I think happened to me. I caught the fire and now I can't put it out.
Yeah. And I think that's the struggle we have. We think we have a great product. And we're because of professionals like you, we're trying to develop it, make it better all the time. But over the period of years, it's like, no, I don't think I need to learn anymore.
Right.
I'm going, wow, that's scary. That scares me. And as a profession, because I know how much I still need to learn. And well, I think what I would like to do, if there's some good reaction, because we're going to turn this also into a podcast. I think getting you on a podcast and having you just kind of share the heart and spirit of Michael Kane would be, because I mean, you mentioned 8 books already just in this short period of time that you were able to tie together with what we're talking about to give it more texture and more meat, which is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that not many people can do that. But I think probably the biggest thing, just as a way to say thank you, is, and I think everybody out there realizes this, one of the greatest compliments that I think you can get is the fact when your patients leave you, they say, this guy gets me. Now think about the world today. How many people are sad because they know nobody gets them? How many people are depressed because they know nobody gets them? How many people literally are jumping off buildings because nobody gets them, or are just don't move and are kind of apathetic because nobody gets them? To create an environment like you have in your clinic, that people are going to get healed and the pain's going to go away and they're going to move better and all that cool stuff. But man, if you have a system by which people turn around and look at you with those eyes and just say something, man, thank you because you get me. Man, I think that's what it's all about. So thank you for getting me, and thank you for getting all your friends and patients. But I think that's one of your many talents that you have that ability to do that.
Hey, so before we sign off, if I could just read you something right along this line.
Sure.
So this came from 2 things. I watched this podcast. This is a physician-based podcast on teaching people communication skills like motivational interviewing. I saw that came from a podcast I saw, I think I just saw it probably in the last 2 years, but it was from 2011. Now, these are physicians. Now, they say if you use a biopsychosocial interview, kind of like motivational interviewing, which at the end, if that patient, if you could interview that patient and they said, that guy got me or she really got me, here's what happens. This is evidence-based. Improved patient recall, improved medication adherence, fewer tests and referrals, faster symptom resolution, better control of hypertension, better control of diabetes, less doctor shopping, lower risk of malpractice lawsuits, and greater patient satisfaction. That's evidence-based right there for why you should develop this.
Right.
And then lastly, there was this is from last year or 2023, it's a magazine called Insight. And it says, when it comes to, so this is their research, when it comes to brand promise, every experience, whether direct or indirect, can change brand associations with your clients. People who felt they were treated as unique are 295% more likely to rate an organization's overall image as excellent. Statistically speaking, the odds of a healthcare organization receiving an excellent brand 9 times higher when the consumer reports they treated me like an individual. It's that kind of stuff that's evidence-based, but the approach is not a protocol. You got to learn how to listen, how to hear metaphors, how to ask questions, and then implement your evaluation and then close the deal so that then the person's like, wow, And then nobody's ever talked to me that way. They got me. And I've never had this approach before. I've never had anyone evaluate me that way. So
Yeah,
that's the exciting thing.
I agree.
And
Yeah.
if you're a therapist and you work for someone, that's how you become valuable.
Yeah.
Because the owner is going to go, wow, I have a kid that just started last year as a PTA. And man, I'm telling you, in the first 3 months, and he came through our clinic as a student, so he's seeing part of my patients, right? Because we have a lot of our Medicare patients that we see initially. I evaluate, see a PTA come back to me. And every time this guy saw someone, hey, that's new guy, Luis, he's amazing, So I think it's that skill set of connecting with people.
Yeah.
They're talking about him.
Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing about that is you have the natural ability. So when you learn more about it, it went sky high. Some of us don't, but it all can be learned, I believe. It can be learned and practiced, and you can understand the principles of how to listen and how to take what they just said and either turn into another question or a compliment, or so they really know that you do get them. You're not just doing it because it's a technique. You're doing it because it's a process that you say, I do want to get you. I do want to care for you. So.
And again, that's what I'd leave this with is we should be thinking as professionals, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's powerful. Well, this has been a blessing for me. You've always been a blessing to me. The fact that you just take time to kind of share with our audience and about the importance of, obviously we're talking about the GIFT program, but we're talking about any education. This is not the stuff that we're doing.
Right.
You mentioned a number of books, and just that people can get, I think get more motivated about what they do, more passionate. I think it's all about passion, and you've always had the passion. But thank you so much. It's kind of neat to have an opportunity where something's recorded, where I can tell you how much I love you, how much I appreciate you, and how much you've been a blessing to me and my family. And just wanted to, from every part of my heart, thank you so much.
Got this right next to my desk.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago, but
couple young guys there, huh?
I feel, I don't know, I think a lot of times in life, I don't know if it's just by chance that you meet someone, but I just can't tell you how much, I would say he probably met you 7, 8 years into my career. You know how you're in a career and then all of a sudden there's all this work to get there, and then you're just working and you're hearing other people in your family, oh, this guy's doing this and she's doing that. And you feel like, oh, I'm on this plateau. And all of a sudden you go somewhere, you meet someone, and it changes the whole, the projection of your life the next 30 years because of, I don't know what you'd call the combination of the information and the person that delivered it sets you on fire to continue to try and get better. And it's just led to, I think it's just led to an amazing, I feel like I've had this amazing opportunity to not only rub shoulders with smart people, but then to try and take that information and help people. It's an honor really to work with people that are injured and hurt. And I think we should look at it that way. So thank you for lighting that fire.
Yeah. Well, thank you for turning me on fire too. So love you, brother.
Love you too.
Let's do this again soon.
You bet.
You have been listening to the Gray Institute podcast. For more information, please visit us at www.grayinstitute.com.